Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. Today, I am your host, Matt, and I'm joined by my friends Alex and Jem. Before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem for some exclusive content, or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com.
So this episode is going to be part 2 of our Mount Rushmores of gaming. Each of us are bringing one of our icon of gamings for each of the 4 face slots available on our 3 separate Mount Rushmores. If you want to know what our first 2 faces were, you can watch or listen to our previous episode where we covered the first 2, and then this one is the conclusion to that. So this time we're going to go in the opposite order that we went the first time. And that means that, Jem, you are first.
See, I'm really struggling with what to go for my third one. I don't know. It really could be anything. I think it's going to be Disco Elysium because it's unlike anything I've experienced before, really. It's such an interesting game. It doesn't have combat in the sort of traditional sense. It's more like a interactive novel, but it's more than a point and click adventure. I think, I had some sort of memories of The Broken Sword. I don't know if you played any of those games. They were sort of really old school point and click games. They're well worth, if you have not played them, they are well worth getting on your tablet or your mobile, because they are just sort of point and click murder mystery basically. And the main character, the sort of protagonist that you play, is just so snarky and sassy, and he is just such a good character. All of the characters are really good, and it's all very, very well written, well worth checking out, because it's a sort of lazy game that you can just play, but it's a really interesting story, and it's puzzly, so it's not, you do have to do a bit of thinking. But I think that's what I was expecting with Disco Elysium, sort of that kind of point and click story. And in some ways that is what it is, but then it is also so much more than that. It's also, you're kind of building a human being, really. You're building a personality throughout the game. So as you learn things or you gain skills or whatever, it changes who you are, and that changes the options that you're given at points in the game. So you end up being taken down different routes and interesting routes as a result of your character's personality. I mean, it's a very dark game. Your character is very depressed, I think. It's very so it's sort of game where you have to be in the right frame of mind to play, I think, because it's also, the imagery is very, very well done, but it's also quite bleak, like the story. So it's just the artwork used in the game and the music, everything about it is quite kind of has this kind of bleakness, but it goes in line with the character and with the world that it's set in. And the other thing that I think is fascinating about it is that it doesn't shy away from big topics. It talks about all sorts of different political positioning, and it's quite happy to kind of get involved in very political discussion and debate, and to let your character get involved in that. So it's quite intellectual in a very accessible way. And I think the only thing I would say that I struggled with it was that there's just so much reading. There's so much information in it. There's so much to listen to. There's so much to engage with that can feel a bit overwhelming at times. It's like you're sort of downloading an encyclopedia of humanity. But I do think it's just a really novel exploration of what you can do with a story-led game, and we've talked a lot about those on the pod. We've talked about Disco Elysium before as well, but yeah, so I would have that up there.
I've been watching a documentary about Disco Elysium recently. Haven't watched the final part yet, but it's absolutely fascinating about how the team kind of came together from, essentially they were like a band of Estonian socialist communist hippies who they liked D&D and writing and had never made a game before, and just decided maybe we should write this story and make it into the game. I'm paraphrasing massively, so I would encourage you to go and check out the documentary. It's by one of my favourite YouTube channels, NoClip. But it really goes into lots of detail on the writing and the art and the eventual collapse of the team and the disagreements that they all had, and it's all quite sad. It's quite sad, really. But so it kind of makes sense. The game is also kind of bleak in that way. But I think it's one of those, like they said in the documentary, it's one of those lightning in a bottle kind of games where it's all come together and made this really cool thing out of something he never thought might actually happen. Well, you'll see him stuck against them anyway. But yeah, I definitely want to play. I think it would be really, I haven't, but I think it would be very interesting to give a go. And I know how much you enjoy talking about it, Jem, so yeah.
I tried it and then stopped very quickly because the writing was too good. Because the very first scene is this main detective guy who's an alcoholic waking up from a blackout night, and it's just the most horrifying description of what it could be like to be an alcoholic and waking up in the morning that I just went, no thanks. I don't need that in my head. Alex.
But is he an alcoholic? We don't know.
Well, I don't know.
Is he? That's the thing. It's like that's all the way through. You can have like you know so little about him, and he knows so little about himself. So that's the thing.
And I will never know.
It definitely looks like it. I mean, it certainly starts off that way, doesn't he? But yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I can't remember how many possible endings, but there are quite a few different. Yeah.
I'll take your word for it, how good it is. Alex, what is your phase 3?
So my third phase isn't necessarily a game per se. It's more of a console. So I managed to steal me away from PlayStation for a brief but enjoyable period in the mid to late noughties, and that is the Nintendo Wii. Having not been a Nintendo person beforehand, really. We did have a Game Boy, but yeah, the Wii was really what broke the mold in terms of getting Nintendo to be a permanent fixture in art. Mainly, if I had to name particular games, I would say probably Wii Sports or Wii Sports were the top two, and Wii Fit actually. But it's interesting. I've selected it because it is the one and only probably truly cross-generational console we have. Because my parents played on it quite a lot, and my uncle as well. So it kind of, I think that's what it was marketed as, was a really family-friendly console. Could kind of get involved with, and their games were uniquely Nintendo-esque, but also very, very accessible. In terms of, for when you consider like someone who's a non-gamer, I think very accessible from that kind of perspective as well. But yeah, I think, yeah, we do still occasionally bring it, dust it off, and give it a try. And I think it also was a bit of an experiment because, the controls of the Wii were pretty revolutionary at the time. Everyone was like, oh, this is the future of gaming. Of course, it wasn't quite, but it was something new and novel. And I think that's what attracted a lot of people to the Wii as well. My mum always calls it the Wii machine. But no, Mum, that's not its name. It's hilarious. But yeah, we definitely had a period of time during the mid to late noughties where it was the go-to console that we would play on a lot of the time. So I think it does deserve its place as being on the mountain. Yeah.
Yeah, there was that very strange period where, like, whenever different competitors are trying to work out what the next big thing is going to be, you get things like the Wii, and just whose idea was this? And there isn't really anything like it now, but apart, well, you could say the Nintendo Switches detach the two sides. It's sort of like a mini Wii. But did you ever smash anything with using one of the?
Very nearly. We had a neighbour come round to play Wii Sports, and it was during the bowling, and they have got the strap round and hit the light fixture on our ceiling and kind of donked it quite hard, but didn't break anything. But it was slightly terrifying because it was like everyone was trying to cover their head. But it will fly around. I have seen it happen. But luckily nothing was broken, which was all good. Yeah. It can get, like I say, when it gets very competitive, you got to watch out because you will chuck things around. But yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? I mean, why didn't it? Why wasn't it the start of a whole new?
It's strange. We sort of had this little pocket of time, and now no one plays it anymore. I feel a bit sad about it, but yeah.
And there wasn't really much. There's a limited amount of what you could do with it, and I think that, well, having played on I think it's an Oculus Rift, one of the Meta headsets for the first time ever, and that was last year. And they give you these two sort of joystick handle things, and it is the Wii, but it is in VR. And it feels like everything that the Wii did, it's being done better by other things that offer more things in what they can do. Because, again, VR still hasn't taken off in the way, like, Facebook had hoped it would be, because none of the VR headsets that any of the main competitors have made have been financially viable.
I've not seen any VR games, PlayStation being advertised very, very widely. Not that I've seen anyway. I can't name any upcoming VR games off the top of my head. So I feel a bit bad for people who've shouted out on that, and maybe it's not getting quite the amount of attention it used to be when it was initially released.
Yeah, and it's now that you can get a stupidly powerful computer for almost nothing. You can get a PS4 for nothing. And those established things there are just too many awesome options to spend hundreds of pounds on something that doesn't have very much going for it. So my number 3 is, I'm going to go with PlayStation. The series of consoles that started it all for me with PlayStation 1, and has just been it has thrashed Xbox. I was right all along. Xbox is dead and buried, and the PlayStation is dancing on its grave. But it's okay because I'm onto mainly PC gaming now. But I still spend a lot of time on my PlayStation, and it is still pushing the envelope in terms of its technical capacity. And then the other side of that is they not only make the console, they publish some of the best games ever, and games that have always put like the console exclusives, like the Horizon games and the God of War and the Ghost of Tsushima games, the Death Stranding and Days Gone, just an endless. I think The Last of Us was a PlayStation exclusive, but they've every single console generation they put out an incredible console and an incredible series of new IP games, and they have done that consistently since the very beginning. The first PlayStation was in 1994, and then pretty much set on a 7-year cycle, they've brought out a new console, and just every time smashing it out of the park. And probably the single greatest thing that they have, like in terms of, there are too many single greatest things that they've done, but just the controller, the design of the controller, the layout of the controller is the most elegant and symmetrical, beautiful design, and then it just gets sleeker and more awesome, and then it's got the haptic feedback which Xbox could only dream of, and it's just the best, and has just continued to open the doors of what's possible in gaming. Have you ever had a PlayStation, Jem?
Yeah, I had. I kind of came to it late. I didn't have. I've got a PS5 now, but yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I've never really. We had an Xbox, but only because it was cheap. So we were looking for a cheap console, and one of my sort of like the lessons that I learned about you, Matt, is that you don't like Xbox. You're like straight in there. That was like, hi, I'm Matt. I hate Xbox. And so it always makes me laugh. But I think you're right. I think that, PlayStation just always had the upper hand on Xbox. And I don't know why. Because in some ways it felt like Xbox kind of had some really good stuff going for it. But it just never looked as good as the PlayStation. The controllers were never as nice as the PlayStation controllers. And they're just, yeah, and like you say, the offerings are awesome. So I think for me, definitely, like, but I didn't have the original PlayStation. I think possibly my housemates did. That might have been what we put Resident Evil on back in the day. Possible. So yeah, I didn't get my own PlayStation until I was much older.
I am tempted once I make my fortune to buy a version of each of the console generations and just have that on all. That'd be nice. Jem, what is your final face on Mount Rushmore?
Okay, my final face is Dungeons and Dragons, the ultimate game, the ultimate co-op game. And I'm still playing it today. Kind of came to D&D quite late. I was in early adulthood when I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that I would have loved to have played it earlier, but I didn't even know it existed. So I just happened not associate with people that knew anything about it. As I got older, I met up with a bunch of people at university, and through the game that we helped to run, and we used to play Dungeons and Dragons together as a group, and it was excellent because you just get together, you get a bunch of people around a table, there's some drinks, and we used to have Maltesers or some other chocolate were the monsters. So if you killed a monster, if you got that last hit in, you were allowed to eat the Malteser. Many a happy Friday night or the long weekends spent playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm still playing today. Daniel is right now playing a Swedish version of the game with his Swedish friends over online. Yeah, it's something that I'm very pleased is having a bit of a renaissance, and I think it's a really good game for teaching storytelling and teamwork and a nice wholesome way of hanging out with your friends, and it's great for boosting confidence in communicating, because you can go and you can pretend to be a character, so you can role play, but you don't have to role play, but you can just pretend to be somebody a bit different from yourself. And I think that's great for confidence, for helping people who might find it otherwise difficult to communicate, because you're not communicating as you're communicating as your character. And as I said, it's something you can do with a group of friends and some drinks, or, and at a coffee house. Oh my God, I've gone back to the Victorian era. A coffee shop or like gaming cafe. And, so I think it's just a real original way of kind of like gaming with each other. And it's obviously formed the basis of so many games that we play today. And I'm surprised it hasn't come up. I'm wondering if it's going to, but, Baldur's Gate 3, absolutely, amazing game, completely based on Dungeons and Dragons. And so, it's an amazing world, and it's got lots of spin-offs from it. So, maybe I don't mean Dungeons and Dragons specifically. Maybe I just mean sort of, I don't even know, because tabletop gaming is a slightly different thing. So, but that kind of like role-playing game that's led by somebody, and you get a band of ragtag, like ragamuffins, go on an adventure. And yeah.
Would it be represented by a D20?
Yeah. But would it show? Like, what would it show?
It's critical.
So what's really confusing is that obviously if you roll a natural 20, that's absolutely awesome in Dungeons and Dragons, but in the Swedish version of the game, it's completely the opposite. So if you so the lower the better. So and really, because there were so many times when I was playing the Swedish version, I was like, we were down to the group. No, I think it would have to be a D20.
I wish there was a sci-fi version of Dungeons and Dragons. Don't know what that would be. You're like starships and aliens, but I'm sure that must.
Basically, what Warhammer is.
I don't know. I think we'd get savaged. We'd be savaged by the internet if we say that without doing our research. Because
Thing about Warhammer, you know more about Warhammer than I do.
Yeah,
I shall have to speak to my resident.
Yes, but for anyone who's listening, we're not saying yes or no to whether Dungeons and Dragons is the exact same as 40k. That's not what we are. That's not what we're saying. Meaning neither for or against. Alex, what is your third one?
Okay, my third one, I had a bit of a toss-up as to what I should do for this one. But I think I've settled on a choice that reflects a love in technology, this time for a game on the PS3 that's all to do with motion capture. And that game is L.A. Noire, which is an unusual choice, but I think what it did, where it was trying to really capture human emotion so that you as the player, as Cole Phelps, could detect whether someone was lying. They really tried to push the boundaries. It's completely not perfect at all. And it is hilarious because of, perhaps the reason I love it so much is not for its intended purpose, but because I find it so hilarious. And of course, they put all the attention into the faces, but none into the bodies. So they've got these like cardboard arms and like really emotive faces. Yeah, I just really like that game. I find it hilarious, and it's a good old detective mystery. You get to deal with the casework. You get to go and interrogate people. There is some combat, although it's not like big on combat. More of a set space with shootouts or punching and things like that. There's a lot of driving. I always enjoy driving in games, but it's really what it represented in terms of the promise or potential that was there in terms of mocap, and in particular very detailed facial motion capture, where they actually made the characters look an awful their voice actors. And in fact, there were a couple of people I actually recognised from television series that were in the game who I didn't realise were in the game, but because their faces were so well captured, I was like, oh, that's it from thing. And I think it did represent perhaps the most advanced motion capture of faces at the time, and of course has been outstripped since. But I just thought I'd give it a quick shout out for pushing the envelope in terms of motion capture. But it is one of my favourite games to just mess around in because it was good fun. But yeah, for me, that was always an interesting one. They didn't quite get it right, but they tried very hard.
I always love seeing the actual real life recording of those mocap sessions. They always and to see them capturing it so it's just perfect, and how you get a performer who can perform in such a way that makes it so it's literally they take what the performer does and like just print it onto the thing, and that just goes to show how awesome actors are and have always been. And mocap is one of those ways that I think it's another avenue into game acting for non-gaming actors, because as we've seen, like, the more and more cinematic these games become and the more popular they become, the more people who don't game are seeing them and going, oh wow, that looks, I should be in that. That's something that I should be. Yeah, and it's such a disservice to voice actors who you don't realise they do the mocap as well, which is something I feel a little bit bad about for the cast of Baldur's Gate 3, because they did all the mocap for that as well, and it really doesn't look like it. It all looks really, really the same. It all looks really like all the movements are the same for other people, but so that's a bit of a shame. But yeah, still amazing. So my final one is going to be the Unreal Engine, the game engine that its biggest games with the Unreal Engine 3 was the Arkham games. That was really showcasing what the engine was capable of. And then they came out with the Unreal Engine 4, which is what they used to make Arkham Knight on the PS4, and just raised the technical bar just up to the stratosphere compared to everything else. And then going from that to have an entire generation of games on the Unreal Engine 4, creating incredible games from a technical standpoint. And then they used it to make Fortnite, which makes them filthy money, so that's good for them. But then the biggest thing that they do for me is their engine is completely free to use for anyone. You can use the same engine that has been used for Black Myth Wukong and for Clair Obscur, and just an endless list of, if you go, oh, this game looks amazing, I can't believe how amazing this game's look, it was probably made on the Unreal Engine. And it has led to this entire ecosystem for video game developers to learn how to make games using an engine that is used by some of the biggest AAA studios in the world. And everything that I've been learning about game design, I've been learning on the Unreal Engine. And then seeing all the games that are what's possible with it is incredibly inspiring. And then something like Clair Obscur comes up and then raises the visual and technical bar again. And just at all times I'm thinking, I understand some of that. I understand a little bit about how that works and how that works and how that works. And it's just, it couldn't be better, really. And another good thing is I found out that they take, so if your game is successful past a certain amount, they take royalties from it, but they only take 12% in total. And that is fantastically reasonable for royalties, because everywhere else you look with any kind of like the expenses that a corporation will take for one of its services, it is pretty much always 30%. That's what Deliveroo does. It's what Uber Eats does. They carve out 30% of everything. And so it's always about extracting like resources from people. But 12% is happily payable for anything. So the difference between £88 and £12 is fine. The difference between £82 and £70, that's a massive deal. And even though they've just sacked 1,000 workers, which is a terrible thing, but that is part of the industry-wide thing of going, we want to make our shareholders more money. The quickest way to do that is to raise prices and fire people. But when you think that if you sacked 5 executives, you could keep all of those people. But no, that would be insane. But the Unreal Engine itself is a titanic force for good for the industry and for indie games, because without the Unreal Engine, the only game in town would be these big studios, and they would be putting out the shit that they're putting out now, and we wouldn't have any light in the darkness going forward. So that is my final one. Thank you both for your 4. And I want everyone who's listening to this, if you've never interacted with us before, this is the first time to do it. You're going to find somewhere to talk to us, whether it's in the YouTube comments or on a review or a comment on a post. Tell us what your 4 faces on your Mount Rushmore of game will be, and because we want to know. Tell us that. And you know where to find us every Thursday. We've been streaming some Reanimal and some Ghost of Tsushima. We did some Little Nightmares last year. So you'll be seeing more of us streaming in that space as well. So until next time, bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.